The Portrait, Chilliwack, British Columbia. In December 1965, artist Teresa Montgomery and her husband, Charles, moved into a stately 12-room house in the Fraser Valley community of Chilliwack. Although the place had been used at one time as a boarding house, few major repairs were necessary. Cosmetic improvements alone would certainly go far in restoring the house to its earlier grandeur. The couple were fortunate to have found a house with such potential, and at a reasonable price, no less. The story of what transpired in the Montgomery's house was one of the most widely reported ghost stories in the British Columbia press of the 1960s. This is what happened to these surprised homeowners. One afternoon while Teresa worked in the kitchen, she heard drawers opening and closing in an upstairs room. She was alone in the house. Dashing up the stairway, she threw open the doors to all the rooms. In an unused bedroom, she found an old chest that had come with the house, looking as if it had been ransacked. Some drawers were partly open and others were open wide and jarred off their tracks. An iron bedstead, also left behind by the previous owners, sat in the middle of the floor. Teresa recalled seeing it against one wall on the day they moved in. The chest and the bed were the only furniture in that room. Teresa didn't tell her husband, but as the days passed, she became increasingly nervous in the huge house. Then came in the frightening dreams in which she saw a woman lying on the hallway floor. The figure wore a red dress with a pattern of yellow flowers. "She is terrified," Teresa told a reporter. The nightmares were making her ill. When her husband asked what was the matter, she said she must have become overly tired by the move. She continued to unpack trunks and boxes, arrange furniture, hang pictures, but took little pleasure in this work. She cooked meals for Charles, but ate sparingly herself. Her husband wasn't very overly concerned. He had lived long enough with his wife to recognize the artist's moods. He assumed she had been hard at work on some paintings, and on those occasions little else mattered. She disliked talking about her work, so Charles had never asked. Then, one morning in her studio, Teresa sat down at her easel to paint a portrait of the woman she'd seen in her dreams. Perhaps in this way she could rid herself of the ghastly dream. But something took control of the brush in her hand. Although she tried to paint the portrait of a woman, the face became that of a man with strong, dark, virile features. Nothing like this had ever happened to the artist before. Was she losing her talent? Her mind? Fright drove her from the studio that afternoon. The next day, Teresa found the portrait she left on the easel had changed. The man's dark eyes had become menacing, and deep shadows concealed one side of his face. Each morning thereafter, Teresa would find the portrait altered in some way. She knew then that she would never be able to paint again, at least not in this house. Then late one night, a slight noise sent Teresa again into the unused bedroom. As she peered through the door, a dim light appeared in a window, and in the center of the light she glimpsed a woman's face. Although the features were somewhat indistinct, Teresa felt certain that this was the woman in her nightmares. This was the ghost who haunted her home. Soon after the actual sighting of the mysterious woman, other phenomena developed. The front door began to open and close by itself. Footfalls were heard on the stairs when no one was there, and sounds of heavy breathing came from empty rooms. As Teresa became acquainted with her neighbors, they told her tales about her house, perhaps more than she wanted to even hear. One account had it that a woman had been murdered in the house and her body cremated in a chimney. Another story was of a man who committed suicide in the house a decade earlier. He was said to have occupied the empty room. The worried homeowner wondered if that might account for the heavy breathing she had heard. No one seemed to know if there had been any connection between the two people, or indeed if either story had any basis in fact. However, the previous owners, Rebecca and Jackson Perkins, told the Montgomerys that an old man living in that house had committed suicide, but he drowned himself in a slough behind the house. Mr. and Mrs. Perkins noted that they experienced nothing unusual during the 4 years they had lived in the house, and dismissed the rumors of ghost business as baloney. By spring, the media got wind of the strange goings-on in Chilliwack. Teresa eagerly accepted all requests by reporters and photographers to tour the house, and she took special pains to show them the 1x2 by 1.8 meter portrait that she claimed was changing daily. She said the dark side of the picture had lightened, the outline of a cheek appeared, and a thin mustache was now visible. One night during the last week of May 1966, Jess Odom, a staff reporter for the Vancouver Sun, and Ken Oakes, a Sun photographer, visited the house. They kept vigil in the unused bedroom, which was lit by one candle on the chest. A friend of Teresa Montgomery, who did not wish to be identified, sat with the two men. Teresa was in the kitchen preparing sandwiches. At 12:25 a.m., Odom reported that he thought he heard a footstep out in the hallway. The friend said she'd heard a sliding sound. Oakes, seated farthest from the doorway, heard nothing. Moments later, when Teresa came up the stairs with a tray of sandwiches, she discovered a piece of linoleum laying on the hallway floor. She took it into the bedroom and showed her guests the place where it had been tacked to the wall. She'd seen it there one day, and she'd seen her husband had moved in and was certain that it was in place when the little group arrived. Odom wrote, "We saw no ghosts, we heard no ghosts, or did we?" The following week, at Teresa's request, Odom returned to the house to investigate a small turret at the corner of the building. Teresa had dreamed that the ghost lady lived in there. Perhaps the turret had held a clue as to the woman's identity and her fate. Before Odom reached the house, Teresa had already broken an opening into the turret by removing some attic paneling. But fearing spiders, she dared not go in. Odom armed himself with a flashlight and squeezed into the tiny space. Lying on his stomach, he swung the flashlight slowly in all directions. Nothing. Nothing but insulation material that had crumbled over the years and is now littered on the small floor. When Teresa saw it, she said it looked similar to the white specks she had seen in her dreams. Shortly after Odom's visit, a former occupant telephoned the Montgomerys to report that there were secret chutes running from the top of the house to the bottom. For what purpose, the caller did not know. Teresa suspected it was a prank call, but there was so many questions and answers that she scheduled a seance. A hypnotist and a clairvoyant met at the house on an afternoon in June. Teresa had moved a table and chairs into the empty bedroom. As the men seated themselves, she pulled down the room, darkening shades at the windows, and lit a candle in the center of the table. Charles Montgomery was posted in the front yard to keep sightseers away. The newspaper articles had attracted some unwanted attention. "Is there anyone here?" asked the clairvoyant. "You may come forth now, please." Silence. The clairvoyant raised his voice. "We are here only to help you." Teresa stared so intently at the candle that she saw a multiple image of the flame. "Do not fear us," said the hypnotist. "We bring you no harm." There was no sounds save the rhythmic breathing of the three persons at the table. The clairvoyant folded his hands together. "We implore you to go to the light. You are dead, and on this earth plane there is nothing more for you. In the kingdom of light, others will help you." Teresa thought that one window shade rippled at the still, but she couldn't be certain. As the summer days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, hundreds of people besieged the homeowners, all wanting tours of the spook house. Children told their wide-eyed classmates that caskets floated from room to room and skeletons rattled up and down the staircase. All nonsense, of course. The Montgomerys finally posted a no sightseer sign on the door, but it had no effect. In 1 week alone, 200 cars a day had drove noisily by, and on one Sunday, even 700 people broke the front steps trying to gain entry to the house. Teresa, exhausted from the turbulent publicity, refused to admit anyone unless they had written her a letter first, and letters were arriving daily from all parts of Canada. Charles Montgomery resented the flood of letters and the unruly strangers who banged at the door and peeked in the windows at all hours of the day and night. There could be only one solution. The couple would charge admission to their tour of their home. Surely anyone wishing to see a house infested with ghosts would be willing to pay for the privilege. But Teresa Montgomery didn't reckon on the trouble she would have getting a trade license to operate a haunted house. Chilliwack's acting mayor, Al Holden, said that if the council granted her request, then the entire neighborhood would have to be rezoned from residential to commercial. Alderman Bill Nichols said he felt Mrs. Montgomery only wanted to exploit the free publicity she received about her claims that ghosts were in her house. One day, Teresa said a friend discovered that the portrait was fading and also shrinking in size. They measured it to confirm their suspicions and wondered how such a feature could be accomplished. Dr. Jeffrey Ritterhoe, a lecturer in classics at the University of British Columbia and a member of the Physical Research Society of England, was invited to study the portrait. He came to no conclusions, other than to remark that there are some things happening in the world for which people have no explanation. Eventually, Teresa grew sick of the portrait and threatened to get rid of it. She did. The Pacific National Exhibition displayed it for a while, and in 1973, it became the property of Vancouver radio station. Press accounts do not mention the picture's condition at that time. Were the accounts of the Chilliwack's haunting genuine? That question is impossible to answer. The local journalist who first broke the story said Miss Montgomery told her the painting would put the little town on the map. That it certainly did. But the reporter spent many hours and days in the house and, according to an interview with her, never saw anything or heard anything to suggest the place was haunted. In 1972, the Montgomerys sold the house and moved to Vancouver Island to enjoy a little more tranquil life in a house presumably free of unwanted guests. The new owner stayed in the mansion for barely a year. He said that he and his family were moving for personal reasons. He did not elaborate. The house sold for $23,000 to a young Chilliwack couple who intended to renovate it and raise a family there. The new buyers knew the ghost legend but didn't think much of it. A Chilliwack real estate agent who handled the sale said the transaction was not that difficult despite the house's history. It used to be that selling a haunted home was a real estate's man's nightmare, he told a Canadian Press reporter, but not anymore. Today, haunted houses seem to attract more interest than those that are not. If the new owners ever did start seeing strange sights and hearing unusual noises in their bedroom, in their notorious home, they had only to call the agent for reassurance that no one else shared their house. You see, the realtor did not believe in ghosts. Note, certain names in the story have been changed.